Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming this afternoon. My name is Joyce Lai. I'm with Consensys. I'm an attorney with Consensys, focusing on a combination of corporate work, policy, and other special projects around our company. Quick plug is our legal team has a convertible note out today, consensys.net/convertible note. Hopefully it can be the industry standard for tokenized companies. But here today, I have Clyde Vanel, Assemblyman from District Number 33 in New York. So he is representing the people of Queens. He is a very active and enthusiastic supporter of all things technology related. He is the chairman of the subcommittee on Internet and New Technologies. Prior to that, he is an attorney and was an entrepreneur. Is an entrepreneur, actually, I should say. And recently, he really came to the spotlight within the industry because he put together a cryptocurrency task force here in New York, which was the first of its kind in the entire country. And as all of you know, New York is not necessarily the most blockchain-friendly place, so we're really happy to have an ally like Clyde here. Thanks for coming.
Joyce, thanks for having me. I really have to make sure to say that I really am happy that this Ethereal Summit is happening. It's happening here in New York City. It's happening here in Brooklyn. I'm excited that Consensys is doing all this kind of work, and I'm excited to be here to meet so many people in the blockchain space, so many people in the distributed ledger technology businesses that are happening right here in New York City, that are happening right here in New York State. So we're very excited to see that.
Great. So because you are in New York, so maybe you can give us a little bit of an update about the task force, if there is any.
Before I get into that, I got to say that, so going around here and speaking to people ask me about the regulatory environment in New York. They ask me about, what's going on here or what have you. Again, excited that so much is happening in New York, and I don't want to see folk leave. I want people to stay in New York. I want you to innovate here. But we have to make sure that in the space of blockchain technology, in the space of cryptocurrencies or what have you, this is an asset class that is new, right? We're talking a 10-year-old thing. So we're trying to figure out, how do we properly regulate in this space? And how do we do it responsibly? We have a number of different things that we have to balance. We have to make sure that we protect investors, we protect community members, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we have a burgeoning environment for entrepreneurship, for innovation in New York City and New York State. And we have to try to figure out how to find that balance.
Right, and it's really difficult because I think as legislators, as regulators, there's the difference between being proactive and being reactionary to things in the news, right? I know that the Mt. Gox hack from a long time ago, is probably related to and maybe contributed to some of the thinking behind the bit license. So I'm actually curious what your thoughts are on the most recent Attorney General action against Bitfinex. How do you think that's going to impact New York?
Well, you're not going to get me in trouble here, so I'm not going to talk about exactly what I feel about the Attorney General. I think the Attorney General is great. But what I do understand is this. When I first became a lawmaker, and I would come to events like this, sometimes I got booed out of the room, right? We have certain folks in the blockchain space that are government anarchists, right? They don't believe government should be part of anything or what have you. Then we have people that believe that in reasonable regulation, and we have folks all up and down the stratosphere, and all up and down the different areas of how they feel whether we should regulate or not. I also found that folks feel that if there should be a place that they could go to if their tokens, if their coins, if their value is misappropriated, right? That's when they want government to step in. So how do we make sure, and I do believe that blockchain technology. I do believe that tokens, that cryptocurrency has a space that is growing and is building, and I do believe that responsible regulation, a responsible regulatory environment will help the industry. So I do feel also that it's important to weed out bad actors. When people see that there are bad actors in the space, and I'm not putting judgment on whether or not certain exchanges were bad actors or not. I don't know. Just because there was an inquiry or what have you doesn't mean that there's a guilty verdict or what have you. But what is very important is that this industry, just like any other industry, weeds out the bad actors. One important thing is that this space doesn't toot their horn well. They don't go out and lobby well and go out to media and say, hey, these are the good things that are going on. That's why it's so important for this summit to happen, to see that the good actors in the blockchain space, because it's not just about crypto, it's not just about money, it's more than that. But even in that, most of the folks, what I find, most of the people, most of the companies in the space are good actors. And the bad actors get a lot of the press and get a lot of the news. And then regulators latch on to that. And that should not be the story.
Yeah, and I think from what I've seen at least, one of the reasons why people react so poorly to certain big profile events, and maybe it is that they should, but part of it is that they don't necessarily understand the distinction between a Bitcoin or cryptocurrency as opposed to the blockchain technology that's underlying that, right? So, and I think you do a great job and are very enthusiastic about explaining those differences to the public, to people whose primary job is not to be in the blockchain all day, who have other things to worry about. And I love what you're doing. I know one thing you did is you have actually this YouTube series called Clyde's Corner, I believe, where you go around New York City and other places and interview people and talk to actual businesses that are here right in New York who are thinking about using Bitcoin and using the blockchain, right? So can you talk a little bit about what led you to create that series? Like, what were things like maybe 2 years ago when you were trying to talk about this stuff?
So one thing that's very important is to be able to to educate the community, to educate the decision makers and lawmakers and policymakers about the technology and about the asset class. Average person doesn't even know, when you talk about, you name any of the coins, their eyes glaze over for the average person, right? Average person, when you talk about the technology, they don't understand it. For lawmakers, that's compounded 10 times. So part of the reason why I did the video series was one day I was sitting in my office in Queens and I said, you know what? Let me put in Google if I can purchase cryptocurrency and how far I can do it. Where do I have to go to do so? Lo and behold, a block and a half away from my office was a crypto a kiosk in a bodega. I couldn't believe it. I had to videotape that and show the world what was going on. While I was there, and this was in 2016 or 2017, I can't remember. Seems like a lifetime ago, but it was only probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. But while I was there, for 5 minutes, people were standing online buying denominations of crypto in my neighborhood, in flip-flops, just regular people. That was amazing to me. Another amazing thing to me is that we have to wrestle and understand this and figure out the proper environment, the proper regulatory environment for this space. I said this yesterday. I was at a high school and there was a troubled teen, 16 years old, that when I was speaking to him, and he was exercising a muscle that seasoned investors exercise, watching markets. He had denominations of cryptocurrency, and he was watching, and he was telling me where it was at today and where it was moving and where it was at last week or what have you. A 16-year-old kid, he can't do that with mutual funds. He can't do that with index funds. He can't do that. So the barrier of entry into investing in crypto is so low. It's a great thing that people that were normally outside of the investment class are investing. That's a beautiful thing. We have to see it that way. We should not see it another way. We shouldn't see it the other way as competing with other classes or as looking for bad or just looking for the bad or what's nefarious in the space. It's a great, and we don't speak about this enough, and I don't beat up on cryptocurrency. It is allowing and growing so many folks that were not investors into the investor class, and that is a powerful thing to be able to say, hey, let me put down X amount of money on something, and let's see if it grows and see what happens in the market. I think that's a powerful thing.
So also yesterday at the Fluidity Conference, you were addressing the debate of whether a business should actually be in Wyoming or in New York. So let me ask you a similar question, but from a different perspective. If you were a 16-year-old kid with $100 in your pocket and are just curious and want to make a better life for yourself, where in the world would you wish to be?
Now, I was born in New York. I live in New York. I'm a New York lawmaker. I'm going to die in New York. So,
not you, the 16-year-old kid with $100.
So he better be in New York. Not only should he be in New York, he should be in Queens. I mean, that's the best corner of the world. But in all honesty, it's, and I saw Caitlin Long, I spoke with her yesterday, and she's still around. The states have a responsibility to, I think, to try to help push the national government and the world to try to have responsible regulations in the space. These questions that you're trying to figure out, this is hard, it's not easy. Wyoming has the benefit of being more nimble than New York, right? New York is, we have more people on a block in New York than, I'm not dissing Wyoming, but, but it's good to see them, implementing, different exercises and different things with blockchain and in the space to see how that goes. But New York, we have to take a more measured approach, right? We have to make sure that we protect folks, we protect investors. One of the things that they're doing in Wyoming is that one of the counties that Caitlin was talking about, one of the counties is currently working on putting all of their land records on a blockchain. Powerful stuff. We're watching to see what goes on. In New York, in New York State, we have 63 different counties. We have, it's complicated. New York is very complicated. But one of the things that we're doing is, one of the ways to help navigate what we're doing in this space is, we created the first in the nation, blockchain and digital currency task force to help guide us with a lot of these questions, to help guide us on how to properly regulate in the space, and then how to actually use blockchain. Another thing that we have a bill that passed the Senate, and hopefully it'll go through the Assembly this year, where it's a smart contracts bill. If that bill passes and becomes into law, we're going to try to, within next year, try to do use cases in New York State to be able to figure it out.
What are some of these use cases?
Joyce, in all honesty, New York is tough, right? So we have to find low-hanging fruit. I can't tell you what the low-hanging fruit are, right? But it's,
But you guys will figure that out for him, right?
We need help figuring that out. That's part of the reason why that's part of the reason why we're here or what have you. I got to figure out the technology. We have to figure out the technology side. Here's some of the issues that we're dealing with. It's about, we have to move toward being more open, more democratic, more transparent. So one of our agencies, the Board of Elections, recently made public people's voter information, with your address, your name, your address. Well, people don't want that kind of information. So people don't want to have that kind of information public, right? That is too transparent, right? How do we find, and this is us, this is New York State. We have very high profile people that live out here. So these are difficult questions to try to figure out, but we have to wrestle and figure this stuff out. One of the things that, and part of the process too, is finding out, which agencies, many of our agencies have a wealth load of data, right? Which agencies will work well to be able to put that on distributed ledger technology, which ones will pair well with others, and how best to silo this information. So it's not easy. So first step is to get the law in place. The next step would be to figure out the how.
Yeah, so I think part of the reason I wanted to do this talk is that, we're all very focused on how to make blockchain work, mostly in the areas of, say, finance, right? We have this new initiative called Codify coming up, but what about the people who actually live in New York? If you're a guy out in Queens, maybe they're not working in finance, what's in it for them, right? How do we get the benefits of blockchain to someone like that?
Here's basic. Look, I get phone calls every so often that someone calls yelling at us on the phone saying, hey, my mom or my grandmother died 4 years ago and you're still sending her voter registration information. If the voter records, right, and data was linked with the vital records agency, when someone passes, you put that on the blockchain. If all those transactions are linked, then we wouldn't have that kind of information. We wouldn't have that problem. The only time when someone is purged, the way it works now is that if there's inactivity for a certain number of cycles, 4 years, 3 years, whatever it is, and they still get that information. New York State and the state is the custodian of some of the most vital information. I said this before. When you die, we give the death certificates. When your babies are born, we give the birth certificates. When you get married, you come to the state. It's very important so we have this vital information. When you buy a car, we give the titles. When you sell a house, you come to the state. It's very interesting to us to see how we can efficiently record, distribute, and store this kind of data and this kind of information. How do we do that is very important. How do we deal with with sensitive information? How do we deal with making sure? How do we deal with authenticating who people are? How do we deal with authenticating documents? How do we deal with all this stuff happens with the state? And it's very important. It's very interesting to see how the companies and this technology will help get and promulgate these services that the state does more efficiently.
Yeah, and I think we've made really good progress in the industry thus far, especially with people like you advocating for that and for really the people that you represent. I wanted to ask you a quick question that I hope maybe can illustrate kind of the progress that we've made in the industry over the past 2 or so years. So back to your YouTube series, The Clyde's Corner, in one of the episodes, you found a pizzeria out in Fort Greene that sold pizza for Bitcoin. And in the episode, you went out there, you ordered the pizza, but at the very end, when you're able to pay with Bitcoin, you actually didn't buy it with the Bitcoin. So I want to know what you were thinking then, and if it were today, would you pay for that pizza in Bitcoin, and why or why not?
So I did an experiment, and I wanted to see, is this thing, is it money, is it currency, is it an asset, is it a commodity, what is it? So this was this was whenever it was, I said, let me see if I could go buy pizza with my Bitcoin. So there was a place in Brooklyn that, in Fort Greene that has, that you can buy, you could use cryptocurrency to buy pizza. So I went there, I videotaped it, I showed it, when it was time for me to pay for it, I couldn't pull the trigger. I couldn't pay, I couldn't pay for that $2 pizza with my denominations of Bitcoin. And I'm still analyzing that. I may have used Litecoin, I don't want to name the other coin. I may have used another coin, but what's interesting was the psychology that I had of whether or not this this thing was a currency or not. That's something that's something that is a real question, right? And then are there different assets that can be used for currency, and where is it going? I don't have the answer, but I can tell you, even now, I wouldn't have spent my Bitcoin on the pizza.
But I think part of the reason is that, this movement is so much broader than cryptocurrency, right? We're still thinking about what this is, how we can use it in the real world, and really how to improve the lives of the people we interact with every single day.
That's right.
Yeah.
One of the things that's very interesting too about the currency side of it is, in this country, in this city, there are areas where people are unbanked and people are underbanked.
Here in New York.
In New York City.
With Wall Street and all that.
In the financial capital of the world, and if there are people here that disagree with it, I said it. New York is the financial capital of the world, right? But in the financial capital of the world, we have neighborhoods where people are unbanked and underbanked. And I believe that this technology will be able to, is a potential solution to be able to help close that gap.
All right, well, we're out of time. Thank you very much, Assemblyman, for being here with us and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks, this conference for happening. Big shout out to Consensys and the Ethereal Summit. Thank you, everybody.